Ethan Cole was a quiet man who lived alone on a small farm at the edge of town. His days were simple, filled with feeding chickens, fixing fences, and watching the sunset fade behind the hills. He loved the silence of the countryside, the soft sound of wind moving through the wheat fields, and the calm rhythm of his life. He had no one but his old dog Rusty, and that was enough for him. At least that was what he always told himself. One night the sky changed. It was late, almost midnight, and the air was still and heavy. Ethan sat on his porch, sipping cold coffee and looking up at the stars. Then, without warning, the sky flashed bright blue. The light was so strong that even the trees seemed to glow. A loud sound followed, like thunder mixed with metal tearing apart. Rusty began to bark wildly, his fur standing up. Ethan stood, heart pounding, staring toward the woods at the edge of his field. There, through the darkness, he saw something strange. Smoke rising, glowing faintly with blue fire. He thought maybe a plane had crashed, or a meteor had fallen. Curiosity pushed away his fear. He grabbed his flashlight, put on his old boots, and headed out into the field. The air smelled strange, sharp and metallic. The closer he walked, the stronger it became, like the smell of electricity after lightning. The wind whispered through the grass, and every sound felt louder than usual. Even the crickets had gone silent. When he reached the edge of the woods, he stopped. A soft hum filled the air, not from insects, but something else. It was steady, deep, and alive. Ethan aimed his flashlight between the trees. There was something there, round, silver and half buried in the soil. Steam rose from it, and parts of it flickered with pale blue lights. It looked like metal, but also not like any metal he'd ever seen. The surface seemed to move, like rippling water frozen in place. He hesitated, thinking maybe he should call someone, but before he could decide, something inside the strange object moved. He froze. A faint hiss came from the side, and a small hatch opened. Blue light spilled out onto the wet ground. Ethan lifted the flashlight higher and gasped. A figure crawled out, slow and weak at first. He thought it was a woman, but then his heart skipped a beat. Her skin shimmered like moonlight, smooth and blue. Her hair was silver, tangled, and her eyes glowed faint green like fireflies. She looked human, but not human at all. She stumbled and fell forward. Landing in the dirt, Ethan rushed to her, forgetting his fear. "Hey, are you all right?" he asked, his voice shaking. The woman tried to speak, but her words were strange, musical, layered with echoes. Then suddenly, her voice changed. Her lips moved again, slower this time, and this time he understood her. One word, whispered softly. "Mate." Ethan froze. He didn't move for a long moment. Rusty barked behind him, but even the dog seemed confused. The woman looked at him, eyes glowing brighter. Then she collapsed, unconscious. Ethan's mind raced. This couldn't be real. He looked around, the pod, the blue light, the smoke. It all felt like a dream, but the heat on his skin was real, and the sound of his heart was too loud to ignore. He knelt beside her, checking her pulse. It was strong, steady, and faster than any human's. Her body felt warm, almost too warm. "What the hell are you?" he whispered. But there was no answer. He knew he couldn't leave her there. If someone found this, whatever it was, they might take her away. And something deep inside him, maybe curiosity, maybe instinct, told him she needed help. He lifted her gently, surprised at how light she was. Her skin shimmered under the moonlight like polished glass. Her head rested against his shoulder, and for a second, he felt a faint hum through her skin, like a heartbeat mixed with electricity. When he reached his house, he laid her carefully on the couch. Rusty circled around her, sniffing the air and whining softly. Ethan covered her with a blanket and sat beside her. Staring, she looked peaceful now, her breathing slow, her eyes closed. He wanted to believe she was human, maybe someone in costume, maybe part of a strange accident. But deep down, he already knew the truth. Whatever she wasn't from here. He sat there for hours watching her sleep, wondering if she would wake up outside. The blue glow from the woods slowly faded. The night became quiet again. But Ethan couldn't shake one thought from his mind. That single word she had spoken. The word that echoed in his head over and over. Mate, and for the first time in his life, Ethan felt that his quiet little farm was no longer part of an ordinary world. When the morning sun rose over the fields, Ethan had not slept. He sat in his chair beside the couch, staring at the strange woman who now rested in his home. Her skin had changed color slightly, turning from deep blue to a softer shade, almost like twilight. Her silver hair spread across the pillow. Glowing faintly where the light touched it, she looked peaceful, almost human. But every breath she took reminded Ethan that she was something else, something from far beyond the stars. Rusty, his old dog, lay near the couch, his ears twitching every time the woman moved. Ethan rubbed his tired eyes and whispered, "Well, girl, what have we gotten ourselves into?" He stood and walked to the kitchen, his boots echoing softly on the wooden floor. He poured himself some coffee, but his hands shook as he lifted the cup. Everything felt unreal, like a dream that refused to end. When he returned, the woman's eyes were open. She watched him silently, her green pupils wide and shining like liquid emeralds. Ethan froze halfway across the room. "Hey," he said gently. "You're awake." The woman blinked slowly, her lips parting as if she were trying to remember how to speak. Then, in a soft, broken voice, she said, "Water?" Ethan hurried to bring her a glass. She took it carefully, studying it as if it were some kind of strange device. Then she drank, small sips at first, then faster, as though she had not tasted anything in days when she finished. She whispered a few words he couldn't understand, her voice like two melodies playing at once. Her gaze moved back to him, and she tried again. "You," she said. "You save me?" Ethan nodded, unsure what to say. "Yeah, well, I couldn't just leave you lying in the mud," he said awkwardly. The woman tilted her head, as if she didn't understand his humor. Then she reached out and touched his hand. Her fingers were warm, too warm, and the touch sent a faint vibration through his skin. It was not painful, but it felt alive. Ethan pulled back quickly, surprised. Her eyes glowed brighter for a second, and she whispered something that sounded like a name. "Chosen." Ethan frowned. "Chosen? What's that supposed to mean?" She didn't answer. Instead, she looked around the room, her gaze landing on every object, the lamps, the old radio, the framed photo of his parents, like she was seeing human life for the first time. She pointed at the picture and asked, "Family?" Ethan nodded. "Yeah, my family." Her voice softened. "You live alone?" He hesitated, then nodded again. "Yeah, just me and Rusty." She looked at the dog and smiled faintly. "Rusty," she repeated slowly, almost like she was memorizing the sound. For a moment, they just sat there in silence. Ethan realized how strange it was, sitting across from something not of this world, drinking coffee while she studied the simplest things like they were treasures. Then she winced suddenly, pressing a hand to her side. Ethan saw a faint burn on her skin, glowing faintly blue beneath the surface. He rushed to the cabinet and grabbed his first aid kit. She tried to stop him, shaking her head. "No need," she said, her voice trembling. "I heal," but she didn't. The light under her skin flickered weakly and she looked pale. "Don't argue," Ethan said, kneeling beside her. "You're hurt." He cleaned the wound as best he could, though the texture of her skin felt strange, almost like silk and metal combined. As he worked, she watched him quietly. When he finished, she whispered, "Kind." Ethan sat back and sighed. "Guess someone has to be." For the first time, she smiled, a small, uncertain smile that made her look less alien and more human. It was enough to melt his worry for a moment. Hours passed. Ethan tried asking her questions, where she came from, how she got here, what the crash was. But most of her answers were lost in translation. All he could piece together was that her name was Alira, and she came from a world far away. She used words like bonds and chosen, and every time she said them, she looked directly at him. He didn't know whether to feel honored or afraid. By afternoon, Alira tried to stand. Ethan helped her to her feet, surprised by how light she felt. She walked slowly to the window and stared out at the endless fields. Her eyes widened and she whispered, "So much green." It sounded like wonder. Pure and innocent, Ethan smiled a little. "Welcome to Earth," he said quietly. She turned to him, her expression soft. "Earth," she repeated, as if the word itself was sacred that night. Ethan decided to let her rest in the barn, where no one would find her. He made her a small bed of hay and blankets. Rusty stayed near the door, keeping watch before leaving. Ethan turned back and saw Alira sitting quietly, looking at the stars through a small crack in the roof. The starlight reflected in her eyes and she whispered something in her strange language. Ethan didn't understand the words, but the sound of them gave him chills. They were beautiful and sad at the same time, As he walked back to the house, he looked once more at the patch of woods where the crash had happened. The smoke was gone, but he could still feel the faint vibration in the air. Something told him that this was only the beginning. Whatever had brought Elira here was not finished yet, and deep inside, Ethan knew his quiet farm life would never be the same again. Morning sunlight spilled through the cracks of the old barn, painting soft golden lines on the floor. Elira sat quietly on the blanket Ethan had given her, her silver hair catching the light like threads of glass. She looked calm, but her eyes kept moving, studying everything. The tools, the hay, even the way dust floated in the air. To her, every small thing seemed new, like a traveler seeing color for the first time. Ethan stood by the door, arms crossed, unsure what to say. He still didn't fully believe what was happening. An alien woman sitting in his barn, drinking water, trying to speak English. It sounded like something out of a radio story, not real life. But the mark that had appeared faintly on his wrist the night before was real enough. It had glowed for a moment when she touched him, then faded, leaving behind a thin, silvery pattern like veins of light. He rubbed it again, feeling uneasy. Elira noticed his movement and tilted her head. "You feel the bond," she said softly. Ethan blinked. "The what?" She pointed to his wrist. "The bond mark." He laughed a little, nervous. "Lady, that's probably just from your weird blue light." But she shook her head slowly. "It means connection," she said, her accent thick but her tone serious. "It means chosen," Ethan sighed. "You keep calling me that." "Chosen," he said. "Chosen for what?" Her eyes softened and she looked away for a moment, like she was trying to find the right words. "In my world," she began, "each soul has a bond. A thread that pulls across stars, it finds another, one who shares its light." Ethan frowned, trying to make sense of it. "You mean like destiny?" She nodded slowly. "Yes, destiny. Our bond pulled me here," he wanted to argue. But something in her voice stopped him. There was no trick in it, no lie, just truth and exhaustion. Still, he didn't believe in destiny. He believed in soil, in rain and hard work and broken fences, not in glowing aliens who spoke about love between galaxies. Elira reached toward him, hesitating before her hand touched his. When her fingers met his skin, the faint light on their wrists shimmered again. It pulsed once, gentle and warm, then faded. Ethan pulled back slightly, startled. "What is that?" "It is the proof," she whispered. "The bond chose you," he shook his head, stepping back. No, this is crazy," he muttered. "You must be hurt, confused, maybe your ship," she interrupted. "No ship, no confusion, I know." Her voice trembled now. "They hunted me for this, they will come, they will not let me stay." Her eyes flickered with fear, and for the first time Ethan realized how fragile she looked. Not powerful or otherworldly, just lost. And scared, Ethan crouched beside her, speaking softly. "Who's coming?" "My people," she said. "The ones who do not believe in the bond. They want control, not love." She looked up at him, her voice breaking. "They think I betrayed them because I followed the bond's call. Because I came here. To you." Ethan rubbed the back of his neck, unsure what to say. This was beyond him. Beyond his small life and his quiet farm. But seeing her shake, watching her clutch the edge of the blanket like a frightened child, something inside him softened. He said quietly, "You're safe here, Elira." "I promise." She looked at him, her eyes brightening a little. "Safe," she repeated as if testing the word. "Safe with you." Ethan nodded slowly. "Yeah, with me." Later that day, Ethan tried to keep things normal. He went out to feed the chickens, fix the fence, and pretend life was the same. But his mind kept returning to the barn, to the strange woman who had fallen from the sky and somehow called him her chosen. When he walked back inside, she was sitting at the kitchen table, staring at a slice of bread like it was a puzzle. He smiled despite himself. "You eat it," he said, showing her how. She took a small bite, chewed carefully and smiled faintly. "Warm," she said. "Soft, and bread," he said. "That's bread." "Bread," she repeated, proud of herself. The simplicity of the moment made him laugh quietly. He didn't realize it had been so long since he had laughed with someone. Maybe years. She looked up at him, and for the first time, there was something gentle in her eyes. Not fear, not confusion, something almost human. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep again. He stood on the porch, looking at the stars. Somewhere out there, she said. People were looking for her, maybe already coming for Earth. He thought about what would happen if the government found out. If they took her away, he didn't know why, but the thought made his chest tighten. He walked quietly back to the barn and saw her through the half-open door. Alira sat on the floor, her hands glowing faintly as she traced lines in the dirt. The symbols were beautiful, circular, flowing like light turned into art. Ethan watched silently until she noticed him. She smiled softly. "I make maps," she said. "My world, your world." The bond between... He stepped closer, fascinated. "And where does it lead?" She looked up, her voice a whisper. To us, Ethan didn't understand everything, but in that moment, he felt something he couldn't explain. Like the world had grown wider, like the night itself was watching them, waiting for what would happen next. And as he turned to leave, a faint flash lit the sky again. Alira's smile vanished. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "They are coming." The night was quiet again, but not peaceful. Ethan stood in the doorway of the barn, watching Alira stare up at the stars. Her glowing eyes reflected the sky like two mirrors of green light. She looked afraid, her body tense, her silver hair moving with the wind. For the first time, Ethan saw real fear in her face. Not confusion or curiosity, but fear. "They found me," she whispered, her voice trembling. "They are close." Ethan's heart started beating faster. He stepped closer. "Who?" She turned toward him, her hands glowing faintly. "My people, the hunters, they follow energy signals. They come to erase the bond, to take me back," he frowned. "Erase? What does that mean?" She swallowed hard. "They will destroy everything that touched the bond. They do not want connection with your kind." A cold feeling moved down Ethan's spine. He looked outside, and for a moment, everything seemed normal. The fields, the trees, the quiet sky. Then, a flash of blue light split the clouds like lightning. A low rumble followed, shaking the ground beneath his boots. Rusty began barking wildly again, running in circles near the porch. Ethan grabbed his old flashlight, though he knew it would be useless against whatever was coming. "Stay here," he said firmly. Alira stood too. "No. I protect." Her voice was different now, stronger. Almost echoing, she raised her hand, and a faint field of light shimmered around her, like invisible armor forming from thin air. Ethan blinked in disbelief. "What in the world are you doing?" Her gaze was fixed on the sky. "Preparing," she said quietly. "They will not harm you." Moments later, the ground began to hum. The sound grew louder, deeper, like the growl of thunder. Then Ethan saw it. A massive dark shape cutting through the clouds. Not a plane, not a helicopter, but something alive with light. It descended slowly. Beams of blue energy scanning the field. The crops bent under invisible force, and the air filled with static. Ethan felt his hair stand on end. Alira stepped forward, her body glowing brighter. "They follow my trail," she said. "They think I am weak." She turned to Ethan, her voice soft but serious. "If they see you, they will think you are part of me. You must hide." He shook his head. "Not a chance. This is my land. I'm not leaving you." For a moment, her expression softened, a small flicker of warmth passing through her fear. "You are stubborn," she whispered, almost smiling. "You're not the first to say that," he replied quietly, trying to hide his fear with a nervous grin. The ship above them released a beam of light that swept across the barn. It made the metal tools vibrate and sent a gust of hot wind through the air. Ethan covered his face as the light passed. Alira stepped in front of him, her arms raised, and the beam bent around them. Splitting like water hitting a rock, a shield of soft green energy surrounded them. Humming with power, Ethan stared in disbelief. "How are you doing that?" she said through clenched teeth. "The bond gives strength when near the chosen. You are my anchor." The ship shifted, and from its underside, 3 smaller craft dropped toward the ground. They looked like dark spheres pulsing with light as they landed. They unfolded into tall figures, metal and flesh mixed together, their eyes burning white. Alira's body tensed. "Hunters," she said. The creatures raised their arms, and thin lines of light shot out like whips, striking the barn walls and burning holes in the wood. Ethan pulled Alira behind a beam for cover. One of the creatures spoke in a language that sounded like static and thunder. Alira answered back, her words sharp, defiant. The creatures hesitated, their glowing eyes narrowing. "What are they saying?" Ethan whispered. "They demand surrender," she said quietly. "They say the bond is forbidden. They say you are contamination." "Contamination," Ethan muttered angrily. "Well, that's rude." Elira almost smiled, but her eyes stayed on the threat. Then she pressed her palm against the ground. A pulse of green energy spread out from her hand, and the floor glowed for a moment before exploding upward. The blast knocked the hunters back, their armor flickering with sparks. Ethan stumbled, but Elira caught his arm. "Run," she said. To the field, they ran together through the night, the air filled with heat and light. Behind them, the barn caught fire, the blue flames licking at the walls like living creatures. Ethan's heart pounded as they reached the field, the wheat waving in the chaos above them. The large ship lowered closer, its shadow covering the whole valley. Rusty barked furiously from the porch. Refusing to run, Ethan turned, shouting, "Rusty, come on." But before he could move, Elira raised her hand again. A shimmering wall of energy formed around the house, protecting the dog and the porch from a falling blast of light. The explosion hit the barrier, shaking the ground but not breaking it. When the dust settled, Elira fell to her knees, gasping for air. Ethan knelt beside her. "Hey, stay with me." Her voice was weak. "They know now. They will call more." Ethan looked up at the ship, still hovering low. Its light scanning the ground, he felt fear, yes, but also anger. Anger that they came here to hurt her. He stood and shouted into the sky, "You can't have her." The words were foolish, small against the endless night, but he meant them. Elira smiled faintly, her voice almost a whisper. "You fight for me." He looked down. "Guess I do." Her eyes glowed one last time before she closed them. Her body shimmered, and a wave of soft green light spread outward. The ship above them flickered, its lights dimming for a moment before retreating into the clouds. The field went silent again. Only the sound of the wind moving through the wheat remained. Ethan fell to his knees beside her. He could still feel the faint hum of energy in the air. Whatever had happened wasn't over. He looked at Elira's still form, her skin faintly glowing. "Don't leave me now," he whispered, "not after all this." And as the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, her fingers moved slightly. A soft glow appeared again on their wrists. The bond was still alive. The fight was far from over, but Ethan knew one thing for certain. He would protect her no matter what came next. The sun rose slowly over the burned fields, painting the sky with gold and red. Smoke still drifted from the ruins of the barn, and the smell of ash lingered in the air. Ethan stood beside Elira, who lay weak but alive on the soft grass. Her skin no longer glowed as bright as before, and her breathing was shallow but steady. Rusty lay nearby, whining softly as if guarding them both. Ethan brushed the dust off her face and whispered, "You're safe now." Though he wasn't sure if it was true, Elira opened her eyes slowly, blinking against the light. Her voice came out soft and broken. "They gone," Ethan nodded. "For now, yeah. They're gone." She looked around, her expression filled with sadness. "You're home." He turned toward the burned remains of the barn and sighed. "I can build again. It's not the first time something's tried to knock me down." Her lips curved into a faint smile. "You are strong," she said, "human strong." Ethan helped her sit up, and she leaned against his shoulder. He could feel the warmth of her skin, the faint hum beneath it like the sound of a quiet engine. "You saved me again," he said. "I think that makes us even." Elira looked up at him, her eyes reflecting the morning light. "The bond saved us both," she said softly. He frowned. "You keep saying that, the bond. What does it really mean?" She touched her wrist where the faint silver mark still glowed. "When two lives connect through the energy of truth, it becomes one." Ethan chuckled. "That sounds a lot like love." She tilted her head curiously. "Love," she repeated. "What is love?" Ethan looked at her, surprised. "You don't know. In my world," she said slowly, "love is not needed. We are chosen for purpose, not for heart. The bond is forbidden because it feels." He stared at her for a long moment, then said softly, "Then maybe that's what makes it special." Her eyes met his, and for a moment neither spoke. The wind moved gently through the grass. Carrying the smell of rain and smoke, something invisible passed between them. A quiet understanding later that day. Ethan repaired what he could of the farmhouse. Elira watched from the porch, wrapped in his old flannel jacket, the sleeves too long for her delicate arms. She looked almost human now, tired, soft, curious, but the glow under her skin still shimmered faintly. She asked questions about everything: the sky, the birds, the sound of tractors far away. Each answer made her smile a little more. At one point, she pointed to the sky and said, "Your world breathes, I can feel it." Ethan smiled. "That's the wind." She shook her head gently. "No, it's alive like you." When the sun set, they sat together by the broken fence, watching the colors fade into twilight. Alira reached out and touched a blade of grass, turning it gently in her fingers. "In my world, there is no green," she whispered. "Only metal and light. We forgot how to grow things." Ethan looked at her. "Maybe you were meant to remember." She smiled softly. "Maybe you were meant to remind." That night, Ethan built a small fire near the porch. They sat close to the flames, and he gave her a cup of warm tea. She held it carefully, feeling the steam rise, then took a slow sip. Her eyes widened in delight. "It tastes like warmth," she said. Ethan laughed. "That's kind of the point." She looked into the fire and said, "On my planet, fire is danger here. It feels like home." He nodded, staring at the flames. "Yeah, it does that." For the first time since she arrived, there was peace, no ships in the sky, no hunters, no fear, just quiet. But in that quiet, something new began to grow between them. Ethan noticed it in the way she looked at him, the way her voice softened when she said his name. Alira noticed it too, a feeling she didn't understand, one that made her chest ache in a good way. When she looked at him, the energy inside her pulsed gently, not from danger, but from something she couldn't name. Later, as the stars came out, Alira whispered, "Do you ever wonder what is out there?" Ethan followed her gaze. "Every night, but now I think what's out there just landed on my farm." She smiled, her eyes glowing faintly. "Your world is small, but your heart is big." Ethan looked at her quietly, then said, "And yours, Alira, might be the biggest I've ever seen." She didn't answer, but the bond mark on her wrist shimmered softly, and so did his. They glowed together for a moment. Pulsing in the same rhythm, Ethan felt a calm warmth spreading through him, like the world itself had slowed down just for them. But peace never lasted long as they sat beneath the stars. A faint hum returned to the night air. Alira looked up sharply, her expression changing. "The hunters cannot find me now," she said. "But others might come." "Others?" Ethan asked. "Like who?" She looked at him with deep sadness. "The ones who command the hunters. They will not stop until the bond is broken." Ethan clenched his fists. "Then they'll have to go through me." Alira smiled faintly. "You speak like a warrior." "Just a farmer who's tired of losing things," he replied. The night wind carried the faint sound of thunder from the horizon. Alira looked toward it, her eyes glowing again. "The bond grows stronger," she whispered, "and with it, danger." Ethan reached out and took her hand. "Then we'll face it together," he said firmly. She looked at him, truly looked, and for the first time in her life, she believed it, not because of fate or destiny, but because of choice. As the fire flickered between them, their shadows stretched long across the field, two beings from different worlds, bound by something neither fully understood. The night sky shimmered above them, quiet for now but full of waiting stars, and in that moment the bond between them pulsed again, steady, alive and unbreakable. Alira leaned her head gently on Ethan's shoulder and whispered one word, soft and certain, "Together." The next morning came quietly. The air was cool, the sky pale with early light. Ethan woke to the sound of soft wind moving through the broken barn walls. For a moment everything felt peaceful again. Then he remembered the fire, the hunters, and the strange glow that had spread through the field last night. Alira was sitting outside near the porch, her silver hair shining in the sunlight. She looked lost in thought, staring at her hands as if they carried a secret too heavy to hold. Ethan stepped outside. "Did you sleep at all?" he asked. She shook her head slowly. "Sleep cannot find me," she said softly. "My heart is loud." He smiled gently. "That's one way to say you're worried." She looked up at him, her green eyes filled with light and sadness. "They will come again, stronger, more cruel." Ethan crossed his arms. "Then we'll be ready." She stood, turning toward him. "You do not understand, Ethan. This bond between us, it is not only light, it is a signal, a beacon." He frowned. "A beacon for who?" "For them," she said, her voice trembling. "The ones who rule, the ones who decide who lives and who disappears." Ethan stared at her, trying to read her expression. "So you're saying they're coming for us?" She nodded slowly. "Yes, And if they reach us, they will destroy everything near the bond. You, this place, your world. He stepped closer. Then we'll run. She shook her head quickly. There is no place to run. They can follow the energy through the stars. Through space, through time, Ethan sighed, rubbing his forehead. There has to be a way. Elira's eyes softened. There is one, she said quietly, but it will cost everything. The wind grew stronger, carrying the scent of rain and distant thunder. Ethan's heart tightened. What kind of cost? She looked toward the horizon, where faint blue lights flickered in the clouds. I can break the bond, she said. If I destroy the connection, they will not find us. Earth will be hidden from their eyes. He felt his chest grow cold. And what happens to you? Her silence was answer enough. Ethan stepped closer. No, there has to be another way. Elira smiled faintly. You always say that. Human hearts always search for another way. She touched his arm gently, and their marks began to glow again. A soft green light pulsed between them, stronger than ever before. Ethan could feel her heartbeat through the bond. It was steady, brave, and filled with sorrow. Elira, he said, his voice breaking. You don't have to do this. We'll fight. She interrupted. If I stay, they destroy your world. If I go, you live. Her voice was calm, but her eyes shimmered with tears. I choose your world. Ethan, he grabbed her hand, holding it tightly. Don't talk like that. She smiled sadly. When I came here, I thought the bond was a curse, but it was a gift. She stepped closer until her forehead rested against his. You showed me what life means, what love means, what it feels like to be human. He could barely breathe. You can't just leave me. I will not leave, she whispered. I will become part of your sky. The clouds above began to darken. The faint hum returned, deep and steady like a heartbeat in the air. Elira stepped back and looked toward the heavens. Their ships are near, she said. I can sense them. Ethan followed her gaze and saw faint lights appearing again above the trees. He felt anger rise inside him. They can't take you. Not again. Elira turned to him with a small, sad smile. They cannot take what has already chosen to stay. She walked into the middle of the field. The wind swirled around her and the grass bent as if bowing in respect. The marks on her skin began to glow brighter and brighter until her whole body shimmered with green and silver light. Ethan shouted her name, running toward her, but as he reached her, an invisible wall of energy stopped him, soft but unbreakable. She looked at him through the shimmering light, her voice clear and calm. Ethan, you must remember this. Love is the strongest shield, stronger than fear, stronger than war, stronger than time. The sky opened above them. A beam of light descended from the clouds, reaching the field like a giant thread connecting heaven and earth. Elira raised her arms and the bond mark on her wrist pulsed once, twice, then flared with blinding brightness. The energy spread across the ground, covering the farm, the trees, the hills, everything. Ethan felt the air vibrate and the earth tremble beneath him. He shouted, Elira, stop, please. She looked at him one last time, her voice soft as the wind. I choose you. Always the light exploded outward. Brighter than the sun, Ethan covered his eyes. And when he opened them, the field was quiet again. The sky was clear, the ships were gone. The hum had vanished, but so had she. He fell to his knees, staring at the spot where she had stood. The air still shimmered faintly, like the afterglow of something sacred. Rusty came running from the porch and sat beside him, whining softly. Ethan's eyes filled with tears. But on his wrist, the mark still glowed faintly, not bright. Just enough to tell him she was still somewhere, part of the world. Part of him as night fell. Ethan sat by the quiet field. The stars above seemed brighter than before, and for a moment one of them flickered green. Just for a second, Ethan smiled through the tears, whispering to the sky, I see you, Elira. And the wind answered softly, wrapping around him like a warm embrace. The bond had not died, it had only changed. She had made her choice, and in doing so, she had given him something greater than life, hope. Days passed since the light took her away. The world seemed quiet again, but to Ethan, the silence felt heavier than before. The fields were still green, the sky still blue, but everything looked emptier somehow. He spent his mornings fixing the fences, his afternoons in the garden, and his nights staring at the stars. Every time he looked up, he searched for that faint green shimmer that once marked her presence. Sometimes he thought he saw it, Just for a heartbeat, then it was gone again. Rusty followed him everywhere, never letting him out of sight. The dog seemed to sense the loneliness that now filled the air. Ethan often sat on the porch, running his thumb over the faint silver mark still glowing on his wrist. It never faded, not even once at night when the wind was soft. He could still hear her voice in his mind, not words, but a feeling, warm, calm, gentle. It told him to keep living, to keep growing, and so he did. Weeks turned into months. The burned barn was rebuilt, stronger this time. Ethan added a new roof, new walls, and a small glass window that faced the eastern horizon. He called it Alira's window every morning. The first light of day poured through it, scattering green reflections across the floor. Sometimes, when he walked past, those reflections would move, not by the wind, not by light, but like they were alive. He would smile softly, then whispering, "You're still here, aren't you?" one night. During a heavy storm, Ethan couldn't sleep. Lightning flashed across the sky and thunder rolled through the valley. He sat by the window, sipping tea, watching the rain dance against the glass. Suddenly, Rusty began barking at the door. Tail wagging wildly, Ethan frowned. "What is it, boy?" The dog barked again, this time running toward the field. Ethan grabbed his coat and stepped outside, the rain soaking his hair within seconds. The field glowed faintly, not from lightning, but from something else, something familiar. A soft green light shimmered above the ground. Twisting like mist, Ethan's heart skipped a beat. "No, it can't be," he whispered. He walked slowly forward, his boots sinking in the wet soil. The light grew brighter, swirling in the air before him. It wasn't harsh or burning like before, it was gentle, almost peaceful. From within the light, a shape began to form. Small at first, then clearer. It was her, Alira. Her silver hair clung to her shoulders, her green eyes glowing faintly through the rain. But something was different. Her skin wasn't blue anymore, it was soft and human, with only a faint trace of shimmer beneath it. She smiled, tired but radiant. "You kept your promise," she whispered. Ethan couldn't speak, he just stood there, rain running down his face, unsure if it was tears or water. "You're alive," he finally said, his voice shaking. Alira nodded, stepping closer. "I am." He looked at her in disbelief. "But how?" She touched his chest gently, where the bond mark glowed faintly beneath his shirt. "The bond chose to change," she said. "When I sacrificed my world's energy, it merged with your planet's life. I became part of Earth. Part of you." Her hand lingered against his heartbeat, and the bond brought me back. Ethan laughed softly, half from joy, half from shock. "I thought I'd lost you," he whispered. Alira smiled through the rain. "You cannot lose what is bound by light." She took a deep breath and looked around the farm. "The world feels different," she said quietly. "Warmer, softer, alive. That's because you're seeing it with human eyes now," Ethan said, smiling gently. She tilted her head. "Then maybe I am human now." He reached up and brushed a strand of hair from her face. "Maybe you always were, in the ways that mattered." They stood together in the rain. Silent for a long moment, the storm began to fade, leaving only the sound of dripping water and the soft rustle of wind. Alira looked toward the sky, the stars slowly returning behind the clouds. "Do you think they will come again?" she asked. Ethan shook his head. "Maybe, but this time, they'll find we're not afraid," she smiled. "You speak like a guardian of worlds," he chuckled. "Just a farmer with a reason to fight." As dawn approached, the first rays of sunlight touched the wet fields. Alira's skin glowed faintly golden under the light. She took Ethan's hand, and the mark on their wrists lit up one last time, brighter than ever before. It pulsed 3 times, then faded softly into their skin. "The bond is complete," Alira said quietly. "It no longer binds us, it connects us." Ethan smiled. "So, what now?" She looked around, her eyes soft and full of wonder. "Now, we live." The camera of the story would pan up, over the fields, the rebuilt barn, and the 2 figures standing hand in hand as the sun rose over the horizon. The world looked the same, yet somehow entirely new. The air shimmered faintly with unseen energy, as if the planet itself had taken a deep breath high above. A single green star twinkled brighter than the rest, a silent reminder of the bond that once crossed galaxies to find a home. Ethan turned to Alira. "You found your world," he said. She smiled softly. "No," she whispered. "I found my home." And together they walked back toward the farmhouse. The field glowed behind them, alive, peaceful. a story of love and courage written not in words, but in light. The ending was not really an ending at all. It was the beginning of something beautiful, something human, and above them, the morning sky whispered quietly, "Together,